Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Juvenile Instructor from November 15th, 1900. And this is a continuation of the Lives of Our Leaders series, and this one is called Lives of Our Leaders, the Apostles, Matthias F. Cowley. So, the name might ring a slight bell because there was an apostle after him called Matthew Cowley. We are not talking about him. Maybe I will eventually do a video on him, but that was his son. This is the father, Matthias F. Cowley. So a quick, I don't know that much about Matthias F. Cowley, but just really quickly, is that he was best friends with John W. Taylor. So, and they worked together a lot as well. I was thinking about it since I've made the John W. Taylor video, and I have to speculate just a little bit if they didn't have maybe a slightly more than platonic friendship. I don't know if that was the case. I don't want to accuse anyone of anything. It's just a question I'm throwing out into the universe. Question mark. Is it true? I have no idea, and I don't think we will ever know, but it's just a thought that I had as I was editing the John W. Taylor video. Anyways, so we will get into that, into his friendship with John W. Taylor at one point anyways. But let's see what this article is about. I will admit I have not read this one. I don't know as much about Matthias F. Cowley as I have known about the last few. So let's take a look. Matthias F. Cowley was called to the apostleship and sustained by the General Conference of the Church on October 5, and was ordained one of the 12 on October 7, 1897. He was a genuine American. So 1897, so that's only 3 years ago, yeah, at this point. He is a genuine American and one of Utah's sons. He was born on the 25th day of August, 1858, just after the return of his parents from Springville, whither they had gone during the move, quote unquote. It's interesting that they would just mention that casually as if everybody knew what that was. We're talking about 1858 here. It's not like at this point you should have explained it. I'm just saying, 40 plus years after the fact, you should have at least explained it. So a quick explanation is that was the year that the American Army was I don't want to say possessing, but yeah, they had kind of taken over the land in Utah because they thought that the Mormons were starting an insurrection. And because of that, a lot of people moved away from Salt Lake City in order to get some space between them and the army and kind of just live in peace. Yeah, so that's what they were talking about. And I know that John Taylor and his family did that as well, and his wives were kind of scattered. And the one where John W. Taylor was from, she had moved with her family to Provo, and so that's where he was born. I am assuming that Matthias Cowley also was born around there, because he was born the same year as John W. Taylor, so they were the same age-ish. His father was Matthias Cowley, of Celtic descent, who emigrated from the Isle of Man with his parents to Nauvoo in 1843. His mother was Sarah Elizabeth Foss, a native of the state of Maine. Matthias F.'s parents, as well as grandparents on both sides of the house, embraced the gospel and became members of the church. At the time of the Nauvoo martyrdom, Matthias, the elder, then 13 years of age, was a resident of Warsaw, Illinois. After the Exodus, he went to St. Louis to aid in earning means for the immigration of the family to the mountains. At the age of 15 years, he learned the printer's trade in the office of the Missouri Republican, subsequently laboring in the office of the Frontier Guardian, Canesville, under Elder Orson Hyde. He immigrated to Salt Lake City in 1852, where he married Miss Foss in 1857. Oh, so was he the oldest son? Well, that would make sense since he was named after his father, yeah? His wife, Apostle Cowley's mother, early taught school in her native state. She continued in this vocation until her parents and other members of the family, who with her had embraced the gospel through the missionary efforts of Apostle Wilford Woodruff and John F. Boynton, emigrated to Utah in 1850. Apostle Cowley was the first child of 4 in the marriage. Yeah. In 1864, the elder Cowley died. His wife, some years after, married the well-known early civil engineer Jesse W. Fox, who thus became the foster father of the boy. Okay, that's cool, yeah. The future apostle assisted the noted surveyor in his labors on the Utah Southern Railway, now the branch of the Oregon Short Line south of Salt Lake City, for 7 summers. In the winter season, he attended the Deseret, now Utah University. His early education was obtained from his mother, who, after the death of her first husband, devoted herself to her early profession to support her family. Okay, so she was teaching school, so he actually learned with her as his teacher. That's kind of cool. His education, therefore, was obtained piecemeal, for he never attended school an entire year successively. Well, that kind of stinks. With his mother as the teacher? I find that very surprising. But notwithstanding his school years were thus broken into by work, he advanced to the study of algebra and geometry, achieving more than ordinary success in these and other studies. Okay, so he's interested in math. Okay, why don't they just say that? His mother was desirous that he should learn a trade or profession, but circumstances, aided by indifference on his part and a fervent desire in his mind to study the scriptures, stood in the way of the fulfillment of his mother's desire, and both trade and profession were abandoned. My uninterest in his part, yeah. Relatable, you know? This inborn desire towards the study of religion is characteristic of Apostle Cowley. It is natural for some men to make money, but he has been endowed with a missionary spirit. Yeah, I did know that because he and John W. Taylor also served together on their missions. Mm-hmm. His natural work is to make converts to the cause of God. One of several incidents illustrating this tendency may be related to show the value of odd moments. While in the surveying field, the wait for the transit man to change his position was improved by him in reading the Bible. He possessed as a dear treasure an old Bible which his father had used while on a mission in England. This he carried in his coat pocket and read at the intervals stated, snatching a few minutes to con a chapter? Is that what that says? Okay, that's a little strange phraseology. I want to look this up. Persuade someone to do believe something by lying to them. Yeah, I mean, I knew that one, but I don't think that's what's meant here. Oh, here we go. I found it. Okay, it's way down in the dictionary terms because there's lots of other meanings before this, but it came up with con, third person present, cons, past tense, conned, participle conning, study attentively or learn by heart a piece of writing. The children conned their pages with the great show of industry. There you go. That makes more sense. Snatching a few minutes to con a chapter, more or less, according to the time at his disposal. So he would sit there memorizing whole chapters of the Bible. He has a retentive memory, which aids him greatly to interest his audiences, and he early placed it to the test by memorizing at odd moments many scripture passages. I didn't know he had a retentive memory. That's so interesting. I always imagine people like that can never forget anything. I don't know if that's true for him, but that's so cool. I wish I had that. And he early placed it to the test by memorizing at odd moments many scripture passages. At the expiration of his second mission in the southern states, he, with Elder John W. Taylor, had memorized well nigh 400 Bible verses, and that in a systematic way, all bearing upon the gospel and especially upon its first principles. Yeah, first principles of the gospel, right? Faith, repentance, baptism, gift of the Holy Ghost, yeah? Apostle Cowley has grown naturally and steadily to the position he now occupies in the church. He was blessed when 8 days old by Apostle Orson Hyde, assisted by his own father. On the 1st of November, 1866, he was baptized by Elder Samuel R. Turnbow and confirmed by Bishop Abraham Hoagland. In October 1874, he was ordained a deacon and a teacher, serving in these capacities for a number of years. On December 28th of the same year, he was ordained an elder, and he received his endowments. In April 1875, he was chosen counselor to Edward Davis over the Quorum of Elders, First Quorum of Elders, serving in this office with Elder Russell and subsequently with Elder John W. Taylor, his youthful companion and bosom friend. Yeah. He served as collector for his quorum at a time when the quorums donated for the erection of the Salt Lake Temple. He acted as ward teacher almost continuously from October 1874 to February 24, 1878. at which time he was called upon his first mission to the southern states. He had no sooner returned from this mission than in the course of 6 months he was again called to the same field, and returned from his second mission in July 1882. Prior to his departure on his second mission, he was, on motion of Apostle Wilford Woodruff, ordained a 70 by President Joseph Young. When he returned home in 1882, he became identified with the contributor published by Elder Junius F. Wells in the interest of the MIA, that's Mutual Improvement Association, and was called on a mission to travel for it and to preach to the young people at home. In this capacity, he visited the 10 Stakes of Zion, holding meetings in nearly every ward thereof. His mission marked a revival of interest in the cause for which he was laboring, and his administrations, accompanied by a rich flow of the Spirit of God, resulted in great good to the large audiences who crowded to hear him. He increased the circulation of the magazine to over 4,000 copies, revived the lagging interest in the associations, and practically introduced himself to the Latter-day Saints. And that's kind of cool, yeah? Thousands will remember with what force and spirit he proclaimed to the young people the first principles of the gospel. Using his retentive memory for good. That's good. For a short interval, he was engaged as clerk in the city recorder's office of Salt Lake City under Honorable John T. Kane and Governor Heber M. Wells. In the winter of 1883 or 4, he acted as chaplain in the House of the Utah Legislature. On the day the Logan Temple was opened for endowments, May 21, 1884, Elder Cowley was married to Miss Abby Hyde. On October 25th of the same year, he was ordained a high priest by Apostle Francis M. Lyman, and chosen and sustained as the superintendent of the YMMIA, that's the Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association, of Oneida Stake, Idaho. He traveled extensively among the 17 wards of the stake, laboring with zeal in the cause for 3 years. When President George C. Parkinson in 1887 was chosen stake president, Elder Cowley was made his second counselor, in which position he served for 10 years until called to the apostleship. If I'm not mistaken, he served second counselor to John W. Taylor as first counselor. If I'm not mistaken, because they kept serving together over and over again. It's interesting that they didn't mention it here. But in John W. Taylor's article, it did mention it. And they also mentioned that they served together as mission companions, which they didn't mention here. They only mentioned that they served in the same mission, not that they served together. Yeah? So it's interesting that they're kind of playing down that friendship in this article, whereas in the other one it was played up. So I'm not sure why. Unless there really was a slightly not so platonic relationship going on there. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know for sure, obviously. I'm just speculating. It was while he was still acting in this capacity that he was called to accompany Elder Edward Stevenson to open the Northwestern States Mission, comprising Montana, Washington, Northern Idaho, and Oregon. He spent about 4 months in this field visiting the states named, but spending most of the time in the first named. Why don't you just say Montana? Jeez. Where 39 souls were baptized, their labors resulted in the establishment of a permanent mission in which nearly 80 elders are now laboring, and in which many souls have been baptized. Within 3 weeks of his ordination as an apostle, he was called to accompany Apostle F.M. Lyman to the Southern States Mission, in which, with President Elias S. Kimball, they visited every conference, giving choice instructions to the people and to the 500 elders from Zion then in the field. Well, that's cool. He got to revisit his old mission, yeah? From thence they proceeded to Brooklyn, visiting the Eastern States Mission and visiting points of historic interest in Philadelphia, New York, and Washington. I hate it when they do this. Well, in the latter place, why don't they just say Washington? They were introduced by Honorable W.H. King to President McKinley, who was the President of the United States at the time, who received them very cordially and mentioned with pleasure his visit to Salt Lake City. Returning from this mission, Apostle Cowley has been constantly traveling in the interest of the church, having visited many stakes of Zion. He has lifted his voice in testifying to the mission of Christ and borne testimony to the restoration of the gospel through the prophet Joseph Smith in 33 states and territories of the Union. Apostle Cowley is unpretentious in his demeanor, and the spirit of humility that accompanies his administrations draws the hearts of the people to him. He has laid a foundation upon which the strength of his growing manhood, aided by the Lord, will find no trouble in building a superstructure of finished excellence and worth. His sermons, deliberate, sound, and spoken from the heart, are full of force and effectiveness. The simplicity and earnestness of his soul make him a strong advocate with the Father and endear him in the hearts of the people. He He is naturally and wholly spiritual-minded and finds pleasure in the contemplation of those higher principles of man's being that lift the soul from the material to things divine. There are many incidents on record showing that the inspiration of God to his servants foreshadowed Elder Cowley's course. Thus, on July 5, 1876, he was 18, a patriarchal blessing was bestowed upon him by William McBride, in which it was predicted that he would soon be called into the ministry, and would travel much for the gospel's sake, both by sea and by land, even unto the ends of the earth. But did he, though? I feel like he was only called to the United States. This prediction was further corroborated in a blessing given him by Patriarch John Smith prior to Elder Cowley's departure for his mission to the southern states. In this blessing were many other predictions concerning his life which have been literally fulfilled. In a meeting of the Aaronic priesthood held in the 14th Ward of Salt Lake City, also prior to his departure for the South on a mission, Elder Cowley was blessed by Bishop Thomas Taylor, who prophesied that since he had been faithful at home, the Lord would exceedingly bless him abroad. People would have dreams of his coming and be prepared to receive him. When set apart for his mission to Montana, Apostle F.M. Lyman promised him that with his companion he should have influence with prominent men whom they would meet in their travels. Elder Cowley's call to the apostleship, a prophecy was fulfilled uttered by Elder John W. Taylor. In a letter written to St. Louis to the former from Kentucky, March 19, 1882, in which Elder Taylor wrote, "If you are faithful, the day will come when you will become one of the 12 apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in all the world." President Joseph Young, when ordaining him to the office of a 70, said, "Your name corresponds to that of an apostle of old, and you shall perform a similar mission." He's referring to Matthias, the apostle called after Jesus' resurrection. And they were reordering the 12 since Judas had died, he had killed himself, that they needed another, so they only had 11. So they called an apostle named Matthias. It's in Acts of the Apostles in the Bible, in case you're not familiar with the story. Apostle Cowley has lived to prove worthy of the fulfillment of all of these predictions in his life, and the lesson which he has drawn from them, and which all may gather, is that God recognizes the promises made to his saints through his accredited servants. During his first mission, Bishop Taylor's prediction that he should find a people prepared to receive him was literally fulfilled. He was appointed to labor in Virginia, and it was in Tazewell, Bland, and Smith counties where he found such a people, chiefly young men and women whose parents and grandparents had heard the gospel preached by Elder Jedediah M. Grant in 1840. Some had embraced it, others had become lifelong friends, and the seeds sown by Elder Grant had borne fruits in the hearts of children and grandchildren 1 and 2 generations later. That's cool. I like that story. Jedediah M. Grant is the well-known father of Heber J. Grant, and he also served in the first presidency, but only for a year or two before he died suddenly, at age 40, very young. In 2 years, Elders Cowley and Barnett and 4 other elders who were present only a short time of the 2 years performed 114 baptisms in that field. Wow! Many children were blessed, and hundreds of people heard the testimony that the gospel is again restored to earth by holy angels. The promise to him by Apostle Lyman was literally fulfilled, but notably in Montana, where he and his companion were received by Governor Richards with the utmost hospitality. Before their leaving Helena, the governor gave them a letter of commendation to the people of the state, affirming their sincerity and honesty. In one of the lonely nights that come to all missionaries, Elder Cowley on his first mission dreamed twice of being home before the right time. He said that the horrors which he experienced in those dreams were such as to keep him ever constantly contented in the missionary field. I had this nightmare that I had to go home early. It was in one of these dreams that he met President John Taylor, who said to him, "Well, you're home, are you? You may prepare to go to Georgia now." Here also was a prophecy, for strange to say, although Elder Cowley did not return until after the expiration of his mission of 27 months, he was soon called, as we have seen, to return to the South, and this time was appointed by President John Morgan to travel with Elder John W. Taylor in Georgia. Prior to his journey to Georgia, he was appointed to conduct a company of saints from the southern states to southern Colorado. Several bodies of saints came together from Virginia, Georgia, and Alabama at Chattanooga, Tennessee, where was the central starting point. At Huntington, Tennessee, the company was joined by 57 souls, men, women, and children from Henderson County of the same state. These were the converts of the mysterious preacher Robert Edge, who preached the first principles of the gospel, healing, the millennium, etc., as taught by the saints, but he would not officiate in any of the ordinances. He said this authority, however, to officiate was upon the earth. The similarity between his teachings and those of the elders led his converts, whom he denied baptism, to send for the elders. The people investigated, were convinced of the truths of the gospel, and were subsequently baptized by elders George Carver and Hiram Belknap. The company numbered, with additions from Mississippi brought to Columbus, Kentucky, by Elder John M. Gibson, 117 souls, and arrived in Manassas about the 20th of November, 1880. Returning eastward, he was met in St. Louis by Elder John W. Taylor. He keeps coming up, right? Whence they proceeded to West Georgia, laboring 4 months in a new district. Thence they went to the northern part of the state, laboring afterwards in St. Louis with Elder George C. Parkinson. Here they hired a hall and held regular meetings which were advertised in the papers, among which was the St. Louis Republican, in the office of which his father had labored some 30 years before to obtain means to help himself and parents to emigrate to Utah. Interesting. While in this city, Elder Cowley wrote several articles for the papers defending the saints and explaining the principles of the gospel. Yeah, it sounds like him, doesn't it? He took a company of saints to Manassas, Colorado in the spring of 1882, and it was on his return east with President John Morgan when he called on David Whitmer, one of the 3 witnesses of the Book of Mormon, and heard that man's testimony that he had seen an angel and handled the plates upon which were the sacred writings, which testimony David Whitmer maintained without variation or modification to the end of his days. Apostle Cowley is an energetic worker in the mission field, and the saints where he has labored are greatly attached to him because of his plain manner, his simplicity and open-heartedness. His energy has even increased in his missionary labors at home since his call to the present exalted station, and his value as a laborer in the cause of God will become more apparent as the years roll by. The gifts of the gospel are enjoyed by him, while the power of the Spirit of God is richly manifest in his administrations among the people. What man could be more childlike in simplicity yet strong in faith than one who could go before the Lord as Elder Cowley did, as related in the following incident? On one occasion, while on his mission, Elder Cowley asked the Lord for a pair of shoes. Shortly thereafter, a man handed him $1, saying that an elderly lady, Sister Jane Richardson, had sent it to assist him to purchase shoes. The next day, a shoemaker informed him that he had made a pair of shoes for himself, but strange to say, they would not fit. He had never missed fitting himself before. He then proffered to let Brother Cowley to have them. The shoes fitted his feet as if made for them. Thus was the prayer of faith answered, and no burden was placed upon the saints. Wow, that's kind of cool. I like that. With short, well-knit frame indicating physical strength, with robust health, a clear spiritual discernment, abiding love for the people, an Israelite without guile, Apostle Cowley stands upon the threshold of a career which gives promise of great activity and results for good, for the glory and advancement of the kingdom of God. Edward H. Anderson. Okay, I learned a lot. It's interesting to me that he basically was a missionary, yeah? Like that was kind of his main thing. I do like that. I think that's really cool. There is something missing to this story, which was also missing from John W. Taylor, and it was simply because this was written in 1900 and the events that led up to this happened later. So I will mention it, but basically, so what happened was he and John W. Taylor were very close, yes? And John W. Taylor had a very strong testimony of polygamy, and so did Matthias F. Cowley. They both believed in it very strongly, and after the first manifesto of 1890, they interpreted that as understanding that it meant that we had to obey the laws of the land in the United States because that's where it was illegal, but in Mexico it was still legal, as well as just outside of the United States. If they were in their international waters, for example, like on a boat, then they could still get married again if they wanted to have another wife. So they both did that, and eventually there was a second manifesto in 19... Oh, I'm going to get the year wrong. I want to say 1904? I'm not 100% sure about the date. I'm going to try and check it really quick. It's April 6, 1904. Yes! Okay. I'm so smart. Okay. But basically it was saying that if anybody else marries another wife anywhere in the world that belongs to this church, you will be excommunicated. Like, he had to really, like, lay down the law because it was getting out of hand. People were still marrying plural wives, and it had been rescinded. You know, he's like, dude, accept this. We're not doing this anymore. And, yeah, like, both Matthias F. Cowley and John W. Taylor really struggled with that, to the point that they resigned. They resigned from their callings. They resigned from the Quorum of the 12, 28 October 1905. And so that was shortly thereafter, yeah? And his priesthood was suspended 11th of May 1911 because he married another wife. Matthias, stop it. And John W. Taylor did the same thing. In fact, he married two. I do not believe that he was excommunicated. John W. Taylor was. But he came back to the church later. Matthias F. Cowley had his priesthood suspended, but he never bothered to rectify that. That's just how it was until his death in 1940, which was significantly later than John W. Taylor's death, so they did not live the same long length of life. But yeah, like, he was just somebody who really, really felt very strongly about this point, and that's why he could not accept it, no matter how hard he tried. So, but that has consequences, you know? You can't just do whatever you want. So, anyway, so that's what happened to him. However, I feel like he was an absolute natural-born missionary. The way he has a retentive memory and, like, memorizes stuff, and I don't know, like, it's so cool that he would spend all his time doing this. You would think that he would get tired of it, but no, he doesn't ever seem to, yeah? It's like, oh, he went on this mission, and then he went on that mission, and then he went on that mission. And it was interesting that his, in a Patriarchal Blessing, said that he would go overseas as well, but I don't think he ever did. I mean, he went to different missions within the United States. So, anyways, I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. I don't think he was a bad person at any rate of any, you know, by anyone's estimation. I really admire him as a person, and I think that he was a very person of his own convictions, yeah? Yeah, a really strong conviction person, if that is grammatically correct, which it probably isn't. But anyways, I hope you liked the video today. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.